Pop Culture Pastor.
All right. Hey, Cody, what's with all the witch stuff? And is it just because it's Halloween? We're getting close to Halloween and we got to have witch stories? Because, like, in the last couple days, I've been bombarded with 2 witch stories.
I blame Hocus Pocus too.
Well, that was item number 1 on Christian uptightness at the beginning of the month for sure. It's like everybody was like, oh, you can't let your kids watch Hocus Pocus 2. And I'm like, I know. Why would I let them watch anything that crappy? Hocus Pocus 1 wasn't that good. Why would I let them watch the sequel? Oh, you're talking because of the witch stuff.
I was thinking because of Bette.
Well, I just don't like Bette Midler. I agree. Don't let them watch that junk.
I will say that it wasn't a horrible sequel. That it was kind of weird and it didn't need to happen, but there were parts I enjoyed.
Yeah. So this is the stuff we kind of run into all the time as pastors who are also into pop culture. Like, where do you draw the line of some of this stuff where, like, popular American Christianity draws these lines all over the place?
Oh, yeah.
And, they draw it at Harry Potter. A lot of people do. Even Lord of the Rings, which is...
You get out of here with that slander.
It's kind of hilarious since Lord of the Rings was written by Tolkien, who was a Christian, and there's a lot of Christian allegories in it, although they're more subtle than his friend C.S. Lewis's Narnia books.
They were more over the head, beat you with the Bible.
By the way, side note, if you're watching The Rings of Power, there's been some really cool allusions to that sort of thinking. I've been pleasantly surprised to see some of that sort of allegorical kind of things making their way that Tolkien would have, like, if Tolkien wrote this story, there's been some things in Rings of Power, some discussions and some things said that I thought he would have appreciated that.
Yeah. Might have been worded slightly different and might have been more drawn out.
Right. Lots more, there were lots more dwarven songs.
Because that's what was really missing.
Yeah. But no, I've really enjoyed Rings of Power. But yes, back to the witch stuff. There were 2 stories. The first of them is apparently Vanessa Hudgens.
Yeah.
From High School Musical.
1, 2, and 3.
She's produced an unscripted film, Dead Hot Season of the Witch. The project documents Hudgens' journey in Salem, Massachusetts, along with her best friend, musician Gigi McGree. Is that a real person?
That's a made-up person.
As they set out to learn about witchcraft, ghost hunting, and connecting with the spirit world. That's satanic.
I have already seen enough Ghost Adventures episodes for everyone, and if they weren't able to prove it by now, Vanessa's not going to change anything for me.
Yeah. They spent 8 days shooting. The duo stars in a 90-minute reality film, which is described as an intimate journey into the supernatural realm. A coming-of-age story that explores identity, feminine power, and sisterhood. Now, here's the interesting thing.
Okay.
I've heard things like this before where this feminine power intermingled with Wiccan witchcraft type stuff. Like as if that's the only way females can have power. And I think that thinking's what I don't like about it. Because as someone who's a Christian, I know that the early church, the Christian church, is really at the forefront of championing women leaders.
And, even in the Hebrew Bible, Deborah was a prophetess judge. And come on. And JL probably has the coolest story in the Bible, even though it's quite short. She stabs a dude in the head with a tent spike. Boom.
Yes. It's hardcore stuff there.
It is.
Yeah. This is all just weird. So I'm looking at this article. So both this Gigi McGree and Vanessa Hudgens, according to this article on Variety, self-taught students of witchcraft. Been experimenting and connecting with the spirit world for much of their lives.
Someone's been watching Hocus Pocus 1.
After an experience in Northern California somehow went awry, they realized they needed to seek out proper mentorship and training. Y'all need Jesus.
Please.
And so the president of this Bunham Murray Productions, who's putting out this documentary, I guess, they've been doing little spells since they were kids, and they were just really interested in that world.
Okay.
This is really odd. This is really odd, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. This is like one of those areas where I cross over. My pop culture crosses a little bit more over into my pastor world, where I want to be like, yeah, I don't doubt that you may have experienced some things.
Yeah.
But I can pretty much guarantee they weren't good things.
Yeah. And so I'll come back to this discussion in our second part for tonight, just because I think this is the byproduct of something that we're going to talk about.
Okay. Yeah. And so the other story was this headline's amazing.
Okay.
This comes from Yahoo. TikTok witches say Gisele Bündchen is taking her energy back from Tom Brady amid divorce rumors. The Chiefs beat the Buccaneers so bad. It started Gisele witchcraft rumors.
You know what? With how bad the score was predicted to be and like how close of a game it was supposed to be, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. This is silly. I know they're just reporting on a silly TikTok videos, and this is one of those headlines where they're clearly just grabbing for some clicks, and they probably they're not rubber stamping this. I don't think. We rarely go into sports, but Gisele is a pop culture icon of her own.
Fashionista.
Yeah. And so I feel comfortable saying this. This situation just makes me sad for them. And I don't know if TikTok witches should be making videos and then real reputable news outlets reporting stuff like this. Because, listen, I can tell you what's happening. Mm-hmm. Tom Brady did an interview back in 2006 where he'd won a couple Super Bowls, and he said he said something in that interview where he said, I just keep thinking there has to be more out there. There has to be something out there. This dude is so looking for something to fill him, and he's done everything he can do in football, and now he doesn't know what to do but keep playing. And it's kind of sad because what we're seeing in real time is a dude maybe losing his family.
Yeah, which is ultimately the big picture item, is like, there's some personal things going on between him and Gisele, and that it's really none of our business. But why is Yahoo running with this article? It's weird.
Apparently this Yahoo article says Gisele reportedly performs rituals to support Brady, his health, and his athleticism.
I'm hoping that those rituals are praying and maybe fasting. Those are great rituals to practice.
Something's up. He's the greatest of all time, right? He's the best quarterback ever.
Right now, you have to label him that.
And there's really nothing about him where you look at him and think, that dude, he's fast or he's strong. There's nothing really about him where you'd be like, yeah, it makes sense that dude's the greatest of all time.
Literally, he just looks like a dude.
Yeah, he does, but he's the best. I think it's because he's pretty smart and he understands the game. Yahoo begs to differ, and the TikTok witches as well.
Well, now that Gisele has taken her power back, I guess we'll see.
Gisele taking her power back. Why are we so weird? Why are humans so weird?
Because we look for meaning in everything, even though most of the time the answer is a lot simpler than we want it to be.
Yeah. So if that's where you're at, I will give it to this. Wiccans are really into the earth and taking care of the earth, so that's a pro. That's a pro.
Be good stewards of the earth.
We share that. Our faith wants us to, we should be good stewards of the earth. So we agree on that front.
Yes. Now,
We like to find bridges, not places where we're separated.
yeah. Indeed.
We should talk about Henry Cavill because, it was that time of the week.
Yeah.
Henry Cavill rumor time.
DC's back.
Oh my gosh. You sent me that and I'm just like, dude, these rumors come out weekly.
Except DC never went away.
Say what? now you're just trolling.
You don't know me. You don't know me.
So lots of rumors. And of course, ever since San Diego Comic-Con, really, there's been rumors almost weekly about whether he was joining Marvel, whether he was coming back to DC. It would almost alternate. And it was almost like these studios were putting out the news, these leaks themselves. So this week, it's another leak. And the rumor is that Cavill is going to pop up in an after credit scene of Black Adam as Superman.
I'm here for it.
Well, of course.
I'm here for it, Dave.
Let's talk about Black Adam for a moment because here's what scares me about Black Adam. Because DC's failures, I feel like there's a lot riding on this movie. Either it's going to blow me away and I'm going to be like you, DC's back.
Except it was never gone.
Oh, it was totally gone. Or it's going to finish burying DC. Like the dirt will be on the grave and I will lose all interest in DC. And what really sucks about that is this should be a fun movie because listen, Black Adam is not a core DC character like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. This should be like a Guardians of the Galaxy type moment for DC where we should just have fun with this. And because of the history, we can't. Like this movie's got to rock. It's got to rock. It has to.
Well, it has the rock.
And I don't mean have the rock. I mean, it's got to rock.
So I do think that it would be cool to have a quote unquote fun movie, but at the same time with the direction that they're supposedly going, that the hierarchy is going to change. You have to have Black Adam be soup level.
Yeah, see, and okay. So I won't say that it's not possible to have Black Adam as a central character of your ongoing DC movie universe.
He could be a catalyst.
Because nobody thought anything of Iron Man. And
I could still care less about Iron Man, except for Endgame.
Cody notwithstanding, the MCU made Iron Man their linchpin. Mm-hmm. He was the linchpin of the entire universe. The whole first 20 movies wraps up on his sacrifice. And
spoilers.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Endgame, sorry.
I love you, 3000.
I can't believe you're listening to this if you haven't seen Endgame. But so could Black Adam conceivably be a linchpin in an ongoing DC movie universe? Yeah, I guess, except for it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But it's The Rock.
He can connect the tissue between Shazam and Superman and then somehow bring Batman back. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, this week there's been a lot of internet chatter about the return of Cavill as Superman, possibly in a post-credit scene of Black Adam. But they're just rumors. There's nobody's seen anything to confirm any of this. I don't even know that any critics have seen Black Adam yet. Have they been screening this? I haven't heard anything about it. So
I've been trying to go spoiler free.
Yeah. Cody doesn't look for that type of stuff. I do. I kind of dig spoilers. It doesn't affect my enjoyment of a movie.
With Marvel, I'm okay with most spoilers, except I don't want it spoiling Thor and I don't want it spoiling Guardians.
Yeah. Here's my hope. I guess this is where I'm going with this. As I'm more of a Marvel fan, that's no secret, but I actually do hope Cavill comes back as Superman. Because listen, of all the Zack Snyder movies and the DCEU stuff, the first half of Man of Steel is maybe my favorite hour of DCEU entertainment. I loved the first half of Man of Steel. Absolutely loved it. And we've talked about this on the show before. It just made me sad that he never got to be just Superman.
Restore the Snyderverse.
No, see, I'm all for getting rid of that. I'm for. So a lot of the Snyder fans were upset about this news because he's not. The rumors are he's in the red and blues, not the black that he was in the last time we saw him, and that means that they're not continuing the Snyderverse.
Or somehow we get set into a different verse.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really know what's going to happen until the Flash movie happens, because that's supposed to reset a bunch of things. I don't know. We'll see.
And did you see the rumor about the Flash movie?
That they didn't rewrite anything? That they're going with the original story?
That Ezra came in for some touch-up scenes.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel
so
about
they're
that.
still going ahead with it.
I mean, you need an entire apology tour with Ezra leading the charge and really giving sincere and kind of owning his behavior, like if for that to work, in my opinion. Otherwise, that could be a huge mistake.
Yeah,
but I don't know what choice they have either.
There's too much baggage, and like it's not small things; it's big things.
Yeah,
not just the assaults, but the accusations of grooming, the accusations of kidnapping. Those things are huge. And so those alone like would cancel any pastor. Just accusation, even if it looks like it is so far-fetched. No, that pastor's done.
Yeah.
If a teacher had those accusations, they're done. Almost most major jobs you can think of, a person is out. Now, they might be able to find grace later on down the road, but I'm still baffled by we're going to cut Batgirl and we're going to keep the Flash.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think Batgirl was going to be great by any stretch of the imagination, but like between the two, one has no conflict whatsoever. The other one, like if it's even partially true, is a tragedy.
Well, I don't have a lot of hope in that they know what they're doing, because that new leader at Warner Brothers, what's his name, David something, starts with a Z maybe. I don't remember, but they announced just today as we're recording this that they're ending the Cartoon Network, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but there's a real cult-like fan following of some of those cartoons.
Where am I going to watch Johnny Bravo?
People were upset.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was seemingly not something that was failing. Like there was a contingent of people that really loved that channel and the shows on it. And so they were just ending it. They're making it into something else, I guess. But it sounded like they were going to end all the current shows that were on there. Which,
Adult Swim's going the way of the dodo bird.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like, what's on that? Like Rick and Morty and stuff like that?
Rick and Morty, Robot Chicken, which I did enjoy Robot Chicken.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Black Adam, we'll be reviewing that 2 shows from now.
God willing.
So, yeah. Right. Of course. Should Jesus delay his coming, we will be reviewing and that we are allowed to keep breathing breaths.
Yes.
We will be reviewing Black Adam.
Unless you were just rocked too hardcore by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson during Black Adam.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that that's going to be a good day for you, Cody.
I mean, I'm just glad Pierce still gets work.
Oh man, yeah, Pierce Brosnan looks great as Dr. Fate.
Yeah.
Let's be real clear. The trailers, it looks fantastic. But so did a lot of Zack Snyder's stuff. It looked great.
I still love Watchmen.
Well, okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's before the DCEU,
right,
but it springboards him into being the captain of the DCEU.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked Watchmen too. I liked the graphic novel better. We'll talk a little bit more about Alan Moore later on in the pod as well. But let's get on to other news. Ryan Reynolds announced on Monday that he and Colin Hanks are working on a nonfiction film about John Candy's legacy.
I love John Candy.
Candy began trending on Twitter ahead of the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles 4K re-release.
Oh.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, one of my favorite movies. It's like, first of all, there's not many Thanksgiving movies out there. You know, we know all about Christmas movies, but Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is an honest-to-goodness Thanksgiving movie, and it's one of my favorites, and John Candy's just so wonderful in it.
If you ever seen the movie that should never have been released, Wagons East, he's easily the best part of it.
Right.
Yeah, although John C. McGinley is hilarious in it as well.
Reynolds tweeted, with John Candy trending, I'll just say I love him, wrote on Twitter of his fellow Canadian national treasure. He said, so much so, Maximum Effort is working on a documentary on his life with Colin Hanks. Expect tears.
Is Chet Hanks involved? More Chet.
Will Chet Hanks do a rap a la P. Diddy when after Biggie died? What's the name of that song? I'll Be Missing You. Chet Hanks with his own version of I'll Be Missing You at the end of the John Candy documentary.
Fingers crossed.
We can only hope. John Candy's son, Christopher Candy, wrote that he tweeted, he confirmed it's all true. And his daughter, Jennifer Candy, also confirmed it, that the project was in great hands. Is Ryan Reynolds is really like a monster. He's a titan of the industry right now.
He is. I mean, he had his alcoholic beverage company, and then he now owns a soccer club.
Yeah, there's the ongoing show about Welcome to Wrexham, which is about him and Rob McElhenney buying a pro soccer team.
And
in Wales.
Literally, he shot a video the other day of him and Rob on the studio set, and he found the studio where they filmed Two Guys, a Girl, in a Pizza Place, and there's a plaque there, and like he touches the plaque and he's like, this isn't metal, it's just plastic. And then like he accidentally breaks off a piece of it.
All right, we need to talk about Kanye, man.
Oh,
Kanye had a rough week.
Very rough. Very rough. Like, you got to be quick to listen and slow to speak.
Yeah, it's so like when more stuff breaks about Kanye, we've talked about Kanye before. It's just kind of makes us kind of sad.
Mm-hmm.
Kanye, I mean, we obviously recognize the musical genius of Kanye.
Oh, yeah.
And so anytime someone entertains us like that, whether they're in music or Hollywood or wherever, we have an affinity for them. We want the best of things for them. And it's so clear that Kanye, who is definitely bipolar, right? That's confirmed.
I'm pretty sure he has said that.
Even for him, the last week's been kind of rough. Following an October 3rd appearance at Paris Fashion Week, he did a Fox News interview.
Yeah.
With Tucker Carlson.
Tuck. I don't watch Tuck.
Yeah, okay. Everyone's like, oh, I didn't know Cody was into Fox News.
No, I think that channel actually is banned at my household.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Leah would.
No.
Yeah.
But
what would happen? Side note, side conversation. What would happen if Leah came home and you were watching Tucker Carlson on Fox News?
Watching Tucker interview Kanye.
I'm sensing a 300-word Facebook post.
Oh, yeah. And Cody, you're going to a hotel or your parents.
Your wife's awesome. She's like, I'll say this. You know what she's thinking.
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't leave anything in mystery for you.
She doesn't sugarcoat.
No.
Where I do.
So she wouldn't be happy if you were watching Fox News.
No.
there was unaired footage that apparently was even more controversial, but he had some anti-Semitic conspiracy rhetoric he was kind of spouting.
Not good.
Yeah, it's just some weirdly anti-Semitic stuff. Maybe some white supremacist stuff.
Well, during the Paris Fashion Week, I know for sure that he had on the shirt that white lives matter, which is controversial in its own nature for whatever reasons may be. But
I think Kanye's got a little contrarian in him.
He does. And one of my friends had messaged me that Kanye is on Tucker Carlson right now, and I'm like, well, I'm watching this right now. I don't even remember what I was watching. But then I saw a wrestler tweet about it who happens to be Jewish, MJF.
Oh, yeah.
And like he goes all in on Kanye. Of course, Kanye doesn't respond. But
well, and then, boy, they came after him. Because he's on Twitter. Like, look, Twitter is not an Israel or Jewish friendly place for the most part.
No.
There's extreme thinking out there. The problem is when you're on the other side of the extreme, that's when you get offended. So Kanye, when he was on Tucker Carlson, he explained the White Lives Matter shirt by saying he thought it would be funny and a mark of both his brilliance and his connection to God. He said, the answer to why I wrote White Lives Matters on a shirt is because they do. Listen, cue the scene of the Falcon saying he's out of line, but he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I see your logic, Kanye, but also
a little humility would be nice.
Like
with it.
Yeah, you understand that by saying White Lives Matter, you're making a political statement, while you can say, well, logically, that's just true. Well, of course it's true. You can't really defend it with that because you know it was more.
Yeah.
Throughout the interview, Kanye was making insinuations about Jews and money, went on unprovoked tangents.
Don't do that.
He's going increasingly paranoid, is what, a lot of people are saying, adopting a range of these bizarre conspiracy theories, and a lot of them with anti-Semitic tendencies, which is sort of disconcerting. There's a weird fundamentalist Christian thing where we get into this anti-Semitic stuff. Mel Gibson went through this, right?
Well,
where he said some things that were sort of weird.
Yeah, but Mel's dad also, like, I think had some ties to some groups.
Well, right. I'm not saying it to be like, oh, Mel Gibson, you terrible person. I'm saying there's this weird thought space.
It's split though, because for every, I guess, far out there Christian ideal of anti-Semitic rhetoric, there's so many pro-Zion rhetoric.
Right. That's why I say it's weird.
So where, like, I don't like lumping people together in a group.
Yeah. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying it is present.
Yeah. And I mean, people can take Bible verses out of context and warp their intent, but
I mean, you can't really take out of context that the Jews were God's chosen people.
Yeah.
He clearly loves them.
Yeah.
I guess I just don't understand it. And it seems like, well, there's just a lot of really, when it comes to our pop culture news this week, there's just a lot of deep things going on.
Yeah. For me, I don't condone anything that Kanye rattled off. And personally, I think that he's trying to build towards maybe a possible run for presidency, and that he's trying to use the Trump playbook.
Oh my goodness.
And that's where my initial thoughts went, was
someone's going to shoot him. Like, that's how this ends, because he's saying just super extreme things. And that's going to, like, listen, when you say extreme things, you invite extreme reactions. And for, you know, I'm looking at an article in USA Today where they're saying mental illness does not excuse his racism, bigotry, or misogyny. And while I agree with that, I also can't take it out of the equation.
No, it definitely plays a factor.
But that's what people want to do. People want to do what this USA Today article is saying. It's saying it doesn't excuse it. So what they're doing is they're trying to take his mental health off the table so you can say whatever you want about him and judge him. But like, you can't do that. You understand he's broken, right?
Yeah. And there's so much going on with Kanye. So he got booted off Twitter. LeBron's show The Shop, he filmed an episode with them. It's not going to air because the rhetoric that he used with Tucker is the rhetoric he used on that episode. And so it's just been completely scrapped and put off on the shelf.
Yeah. To be fair to USA Today, whoever wrote this article does end with, "We can show compassion while holding people accountable."
Yeah, and definitely there should be some accountability for his actions and also some help.
Right.
Like, it's not an either or, it's a both and.
Right. So I'm in agreement with the accountability as long as we want accountability so he gets help, not so we can point a finger at him and say you're an awful person. Like, which is mostly what society wants to do nowadays. But that doesn't help.
No.
And it just breeds more extreme behavior.
It does.
Anyhow, Kanye had a tough week. Let's move on. Did you watch the Super Mario Brothers trailer?
I did. Loosely based on my real life story.
Cody just admitted to eating mushrooms on the show. No, loosely based. What'd you think of the trailer for Super Mario Brothers movie?
It literally looked way better than it had any right looking.
Did it? Right? Yeah. When the trailer dropped, I fired it up fully expecting that I wasn't going to like it. You know that I do have this rule that
about video game movies.
I haven't watched the Sonic movies even though some people have said it's enjoyable. But this movie, when I saw the trailer, someone immediately texted me, "So are you going to break your rule for Super Mario Brothers?" And I was like, man, I think I am, because that trailer was amazing. And it looks great. It looks funny. There's a tone and feel to it that just looks super good. And am I way off base by saying that the trailer gave me Spider-Verse vibes? Like that this is going to transcend animated movies where they usually go.
Yeah, I can see that. Also, I would say that I was excited that Chris Pratt's Mario did not sound like the stereotypical Mario.
Okay.
Which,
yeah,
the internet is mixed on.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I had I was also getting texts from some of my youth kids. Mm-hmm. And they were texting me like, "So we don't like that he doesn't sound like Mario, that he's just Chris Pratt." And I said, well, there's a little, if you listen closely, there's a tiny Italian accent in there. And I told them, I said to them, I was like, I'm going to tell you what this is. They rightly sat down in the drawing room where they were putting this movie together and said, hey, if we come out with, "It's a Mario," like we're going to
Culture vultures.
Yes, we're going to get hammered on Twitter. And they're right, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, it is a gross misrepresentation of all Italian plumbers.
It's Italian plumbers everywhere offended. But in all honesty, they read the room. And I think it's a great choice. And it's very subtle. He still has an accent. But it's very subtle. And I'm here for it.
Like, when I heard it, I had forgotten that Chris Pratt was Mario until like halfway through the trailer, and I was like, oh, he did change his voice some, and I was good.
Well, it immediately made Mario seem more real to me. Like, because with that ridiculous accent, like the over-the-top accent in the video games and such, you're just like, wow, this is really cartoonish. But when he starts talking in the trailer, I was like, oh wow, okay, I'm in on this. This is a real person, this Mario.
Jack Black stole the trailer for me.
His King Koopa, that whole sequence with the penguins,
yes,
where they're throwing the snowballs at him. Oh man, I laughed so hard. And like, honestly, if this movie keeps that energy, this movie's going to be an incredible hit.
Take my money now.
I got Lego movie vibes. I got Spider-Verse vibes. I think it's either, well, we've talked about this before. Like, studios are actually pretty good at putting together trailers. Like,
oh yeah.
Look at all the Star Wars sequels movies. Oh. The trailers were all fantastic. And the movies didn't live up to that. And that happens sometimes. So I am hoping against all hope that they are going to deliver with this Super Mario Brothers movie.
I've already purchased my ticket mentally.
All right. We'll see. When does that come out? Do we know?
Next year.
Oh, so it's a while yet.
I think.
That one might have to be a review, man. We might have to review that one.
I've already booked my review pod seat.
April 7th, 2023.
Oh, yeah. It's right around my birthday. April 5th.
All right.
Spoilers.
Yep. We'll make it a whole weekend.
I'm pretty sure that's Holy Week this year.
Oh, bummer. That's a busy week for us.
It is.
Doggone it.
I could be wrong.
Come on, Jesus. Couldn't we move that? No. We cannot.
I mean, it moves around each year, but that's based off of the moon and the first Sunday after spring.
The week after Holy Week, then.
We'll make it happen, Captain.
Yeah. All right. We're going to get ready to talk about what were our main subject of the pod. We're going to take a little break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. We're into the main subject of today's pod, which I don't even know that I have a definitive actual thing I want to talk about, because really, basically, this just came from more news that was just happening.
The news.
But I think what I want to talk about is the nature of critique of pop culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to talk about the nature of it. I want to talk about what it is. Is it anything?
It's everything.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, the stuff you like is very subjective.
It is.
Like, and so by nature, I've always thought this about movie critics. So when I was growing up, Siskel and Ebert, they were a big deal. Like, movie critics were kind of a big deal growing up. But I always wondered, like, well, who makes these guys the experts on whether I'm going to like a movie or not? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense if you really think about it. Although, is that saying, you know, I fully recognize that I can listen to an album, watch a movie or a TV show that I can guess, is this going to appeal to the masses or no?
Yeah. And I think that there was something good with those reviewers back in the 80s and 90s, that you would get like just a brief synopsis, because I mean, you weren't constantly being bombarded with trailers. You didn't have instant access to that sort of stuff. And so you get a brief synopsis of the movie. You get the high points and the low points, the things that they thought were low-hanging fruit, the language or the content, whatever. And so I think that there was a purpose back then. I don't know if it's super relevant now, although I would say that podcasters kind of fall in this category.
Well, okay. Now let's take what we do with our reviews.
Mm-hmm.
We first and foremost say, hey, we're just giving our opinion. There'll be people that agree with us and disagree with us, and we're presenting it like that. And that's by design. And I think podcasts are a place where you can actually get real critique that's not coming from this biased place in the world, which is to say the world now rewards you for extreme thoughts.
Extreme.
Let's take Alan Moore here. Alan Moore wrote landmark stories like The Watchmen, V for Vendetta, Batman the Killing Joke.
Dare I say, just those three alone, like that's a Hall of Fame career.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
knocked it out of the park.
Listen, there's no, I mean, look, Alan Moore could say Kanye things. That doesn't change. It doesn't change it for Kanye. Kanye has created masterpieces, and it's the same with Alan Moore. Dude has created some of like the Mount Rushmore of comic book stories. I mean, just Watchmen and V for Vendetta alone are like I've said this before. I read Watchmen at KU. Like it was part of one of my literature classes, a graphic novel.
I don't know why my college courses failed me.
So Alan Moore did this interview with The Guardian, and he expressed some concerns about pop culture. In particular, their newfound obsession with superheroes. Mm-hmm. Now, listen, if you've read The Watchmen, you understand he's writing like he's subverting comic books in general.
He is.
And the heroes. So like, it's not unheard of that this guy's going to come out and criticize comic books. Also, he's done it before.
Yeah.
He said this, quote, "I said round about 2011 that I thought that it had serious and worrying implications for the future if millions of adults were queuing up to see Batman movies. Because that kind of infantilization, that urge towards simpler times, simpler realities, that can very often be a precursor to fascism."
Okay.
Okay. That does the urge towards simpler times and simpler realities leads to fascism? Okay. How so?
So I'm not going quite fully there. So this goes back to my Vanessa Hudgens thing.
All right.
Okay. So I do agree that part of it will kind of keep a growing population or an aging population kind of in their childlike ways. And in the Bible, it talks about when I was a child, I thought like a child, but now I'm a man and I put away childish ways, yada, yada, yada. But if you don't put away childish ways, so in that article about Vanessa, it talked about she had been doing it since a child, probably because she had watched something or read something. I'm not saying Harry Potter is sorcery, but let's just say that was the thing that inspired her to play around, supposedly with witchcraft. And it just, I'm going to keep this door open because this is where I am. And this was a much more fun, simpler time. I don't have to worry about the burdens of the world. I can just be here in that moment, and this is a magical place. I think that leads to a population potentially being more gullible. And if you go that route, I mean, if you have someone that is charismatic, I guess, and can persuade you to do things that you typically wouldn't do, I guess maybe it could lead down the road of fascism. It's not completely out of the realm, but it's very far-fetched. So I'm not going to go all in with Alan Moore, but I'm going to say there might be some underlying truths in what he said, but it might lead to a completely different outcome than what he's thinking about. And I mean, I do find it amazing that a guy that wrote comics And in the article, he later on talks about how up until the 80s, this is geared towards like 10-year-old boys.
Yeah. Okay. So he continues. First of all, what you're hitting on is kind of where I'm at with it at first, which was like this dude eventually transcends comics, but clearly comic books are what he owes his livelihood to.
Oh, yeah.
He said hundreds of thousands of adults lining up to see characters in situations that had been created to entertain the 12-year-old boys, and it was always boys of 50 years ago. Now, first of all, I don't think that's fair. Yeah, some of those comic books in like the 50s and 60s, oh yeah. Yeah, they were definitely made for boys, kids. Although I think he's sort of bending truth a little bit to try and prove his argument, because I know plenty of girls who are into comics.
Oh, yeah.
And that enjoyed comic books. So,
and by the time he's writing Watchmen, I'm pretty sure She-Hulk's already come out. There's a growing plethora of female heroes and villains.
Yeah. And Marvel itself, Stan Lee, a lot of those comics were very intelligent.
Yeah.
X-Men mirrored the civil rights movement. Like, to call that the fare of 12-year-old boys, I don't think it's really fair. But that's a Marvel DC thing too. DC takes a little bit longer to get into that more serious stuff.
Yeah. And with guys like Alan Moore and Frank Miller, they go like full on adult. And so those two guys, I would say, really transcend the typical marketing of who this goes to.
Yeah. I mean, they're really opposite sides of the same coin, because Frank Miller has a reverence for comic books.
He does.
And the industry. He does go on to talk about that. He says, I was a part of that. They said, I think that was a misunderstanding born of what happened in the 80s, to which I must put my hand up to a considerable share of the blame, though it was not intentional. When things like Watchmen were first appearing, there were an awful lot of headlines saying comics have grown up. And he talks about getting the credit for turning comic books into an art form for adults. But he says this, he says, I tend to think that no, comics hadn't grown up. There were a few titles that were more adult than people were used to, but the majority of comics titles were pretty much the same as they'd ever been. It wasn't comics growing up. I think it was more comics meeting the emotional age of the audience coming the other way. Now, see, this is where I disagree with him again. And I sense a little bit of like the artists trying to prove he transcended the art. Right? This is maybe a little Alan Moore. I feel like being proud of Alan Moore.
And
which, great. You deserve it, bro.
I mean, again, the titles he has written are on everyone's top 20.
Yeah. He says, I will always love and adore the comics medium, but the comics industry and all that stuff attached to it just became unbearable. Again, that's subjective, bro.
It is very subjective. And at first, before I read too deep into the article, I thought maybe he was going to go the route of, well, the comic book companies selling out to the studios became a cash grab, and it warped the original feel and vibe of the comics. That's where I thought he was going to go. Yeah. And then he went like a completely different path. And I mean, that's a good, it is a critique that has some validity, that if you want to say, it should just remain on the paper instead of going to big screen, because there is a lot of changes from comic book to movie. Like the Infinity Gauntlet stuff, there's a lot of differences between what Marvel showed you versus what the actual comic book had.
If I'm keeping my mind open, and we're going to talk about Scorsese here in a little bit too, because Scorsese was entered into this conversation as well, which we talked about on a former pod, the criticism of the comic book movies. If I'm keeping an open mind, my answer to Alan Moore and Scorsese and all these guys would be, ask me again in 10 years. Because I don't think we're complete yet. The Marvel movies, it's fair to say Phase 4 of the MCU has not been great. That they've struggled a little bit, and the Disney Plus shows have been, like there's just been something. So could we be seeing that Alan Moore, Scorsese are right, that it has a shelf life, that this isn't, could we be seeing that? Sure. I'll admit that. I'll say, yeah, but we need more time, because you can say what you want about the Marvel movies, but you can't say that they're not smart, deep movies. I mean, Civil War, like think about the villain of that movie and the structure of it. Like that was a pretty deep, complex storyline and movie. And you can say it's just for 12-year-old boys, but I think you're wrong.
So I will say that I do think that the mass amount of comic book movies and superhero movies, we might be reaching the
critical mass,
mass of it. And
that's what I'm afraid of.
And I think that you'll see it die down some. I don't think it'll go away. But the social commentary that he has, there might be some validity, just because I don't know. There's so many factors that go into this, and to say that comic books or superhero movies is the breaking point for it is absurd. But I don't think that there's a bigger portion of the population that isn't maturing.
Yeah.
Isn't.
Okay. I'm glad you brought this up, because I was all ready to come on here and just rip Alan Moore. I was all ready to be all proud of my intellect and say, oh, let me tell you all the reasons Alan Moore is wrong. But then I saw this tweet today, and it made me think. And I'm like, look, I have a lot of faults, but one thing I like to do is I like to keep myself open to criticism and the other side. A guy named Tanner Campbell, he's a philosophy writer, host of a podcast called Practical Stoicism.
Ooh.
He has more followers than us, so
we gotta invite him on the pod.
Well, kind of, yeah. I had a little back and forth with him today, because he wrote this tweet. He said this: I'm not really a fan of fiction. I think it more problematic than useful. I realize that makes me seem like an old grump, but the thing is, fiction impacts how people view the world, and too much of it creates unrealistic people who aren't especially useful to themselves or others. I've heard people try to inspire others through difficult times by citing lines from Harry Potter. And look, Harry Potter was a great romp through Fantasyland, but it's a story for children. I feel the same, by the way, about the Fountainhead. And then he put a little laughy face emoji, which it was a little dig at Ayn Rand. But I started thinking about this tweet, and I thought, you know what? He's right. He's right, because this is where, okay, my lover of pop culture takes a back seat, and I go to my pastor side. These movies, these fantasy movies, the superhero movies, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings even, they're giving you a version of humanity that does not exist.
Oh, yeah.
It is unfair for kids to watch Luke Skywalker and watch his journey and expect him to not still be broken, which they do. Last Jedi proved that. All the people that were so mad at Luke's character being broken. But that was the best part about Last Jedi, in my opinion, because it actually showed real humanity. And it made sense logically with how he was in the first 3 movies. So what I would tell Tanner is like, so some of our fantasy gets it right, even if we don't like it. But I'd say that also proves that he's right about what he's saying, that it gives us this unhealthy view. And I think as a pastor, what I want to say is the problem with the hero's journey is it's all based on Jesus, and we're not Jesus. Humans can't be.
Yeah. So one of my thoughts earlier, when I initially read the article from Alan, was along the lines of, again, having childish thoughts, childish ways. Like when you're a kid and it's Christmas morning and you get a gift, like something you had always wanted, for at least a brief moment in time, that becomes the most important thing ever. And you see a lot of adults really struggling with not only separating the fiction from reality, but also uplifting so much the fandom of whatever. Like, there's people that worship Star Wars far deeper than some of the people sitting in church on Sunday mornings. And so I think that goes into what Alan Moore is saying. And our philosopher friend, who I really want to meet now. Yeah. What he said, I mean, there's some validity. And at first, when you hear that people are quoting Harry Potter, you might think he's joking, but no, I've had teenagers who are now adults that I've worked with in the past that they would readily quote it. Twilight, readily quote it. I mean, think about Parks and Rec when they had the time capsule, and Will, not Arnett, the other Will.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
He puts the Twilight books in, or wants to put the Twilight books in time capsule, and he's just quoting line after line. Oh, you're having relationship advice or problems? So did my friend Bella. And then he would go on about, like, this is how it is. But there are people that operate like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everyone does. I'm not saying all fandom's bad. I'm not saying that everyone immediately starts worshiping whatever. I'm just saying that there is a seemingly growing population that this is kind of troublesome for.
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, what I would like to say is that I think there's some fair criticism to be had there, that I think our friend Tanner put it well, but he's going at it in a different direction than Alan Moore.
Oh, yeah.
Alan Moore is a little bit more close to Scorsese, where Scorsese back in 2019 said things like this: many franchise films are made by people of considerable talent and artistry. You can see it on the screen. The fact that the films themselves don't interest me is a matter of personal taste and temperament. I know that if I were younger, if I'd come of age at a later time, I might have been excited by these pictures and maybe even wanted to make one myself. But I grew up when I did, and I developed a sense of movies, of what they were and what they could be. And that was as far from the Marvel Universe as we on Earth are from Alpha Centauri. For me, for the filmmakers I came to love and respect, for my friends who started making movies around the same time that I did, cinema was about revelation, aesthetic, emotional and spiritual revelation. It was about characters, the complexity of people and their contradictory and sometimes paradoxical natures, the way they can hurt one another and love one another and suddenly come face to face with themselves. To which I would say, Marty, that's all present in superhero movies.
It is. And when he is, I guess, coming of age in becoming a filmmaker, Francis Ford Coppola has made 2 of the 3 Godfather movies by this point, and that is like the launch board for Goodfellas, and a bunch of other, like, Italian mob movies became a huge deal, and like you couldn't get around them.
And I don't have the stuff to back this up right now, but Francis Ford Coppola went even harder at superhero movies than Scorsese did. So even he said some things that like this, but Scorsese says this is all coming from this op-ed he wrote in the New York Times back in 2019. And that was the key for us. It was an art form. And that's where I'm like, okay, well, dude, you just outed yourself. Like, this is that trap that Alan Moore is falling into, that somehow what you do is art and the things you don't like or don't understand are not art. I've heard people who were born, who are older than me. So I'm 46. And when I was young, I liked listening to rap when it was still a relatively new art form.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard all the people older than me growing up, my parents, aunts, uncles, whatever, grandparents, this isn't music. This isn't art. Well, okay. Just because you don't understand it, doesn't appeal to you, doesn't sound like what you are used to calling artistic music, doesn't make that so.
Yeah, and I mean, if we just take him at his word that it was about making art, just think about how art has changed through the centuries even. I mean, what Van Gogh did compared to what Picasso did, compared to what Andy Warhol did, night and day difference. But yet, if you talk to art teachers and art critics, they will all say all three artists made art. And so there should be an evolution to the artistry and what is considered art, if history's taught us anything, and it should be no different for cinematic art.
Now, Scorsese kind of outs himself as he goes on in this op-ed. And he starts talking about how, like, the amount of theaters superhero movies are in around the world force out, like, the real movies, like his Irishman, which had just come out on Netflix at the time. And so, like, you begin to see a little crack in his argument of, like, where he's coming from, like why he's upset. He thinks that these movies, which aren't art, are forcing out the art. But here's the problem. These dudes like Alan Moore and Scorsese, they're being critical of this. And this is like what I want to get to the bottom of is, does critique matter? Because here's the problem with critique. If you can't take out your personal biases, which may be impossible with something that's subjective, which is what we talked about, then what is critique worth? Because what Scorsese does is let you in on why he's mad, why it upsets him, because he thinks non-art is forcing his art out of the theater. But here's the problem with that. It's Peter picking up the sword and Jesus saying, no. Put the sword down, Peter. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. Scorsese is only Scorsese because at one time, the supply and demand, his movies were what people wanted to see.
Mm-hmm.
Alan Moore's books were what people wanted to read. And now he's upset because people have moved on. And that doesn't mean we don't recognize that Scorsese isn't brilliant. He is. He's wonderfully brilliant as a filmmaker. However, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's definitely cracks in his argument and critiquing. I will say that I think the benefit of critiques is there's usually some truth underlying to it. That there's something deeper within it that might have some meaning, some value. I honestly, every time a new Marvel movie comes out in our theater, it's going to be there 4 weeks.
Yeah.
At least. And with our theater, it's a smaller one. There's only 4 screens. And the first week that it's out, and most of the time it's the second and third week as well, it's taking up 2 screens. And so it is keeping out other projects. I don't know if those other projects would be as good, but the studios and the theater companies know what the projected value of a Marvel movie is, and that it's going to bring in more money than something else. And so financially, you're getting, the companies are getting richer because they are putting forth more screens and more viewing times for these movies that are superhero movies. But again, I don't know if the other movies that come out would be as good. It again, subjective, because if a rom-com came out, my wife would be all about it, and I'd be like, well, I'm going to go watch this movie.
Not all rom-coms, as I might get to later. Hold on to that thought.
I will.
But let's move on, because I want to get, that was from 2019. I want to get to the crux of what I'm doing here. And this is something recent. And I want to show you that that critique might be a dead thing in our current climate. Okay. So here's the problem. I've talked about, we ignore nuance and complexity.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't agree with Scorsese, where do you have to go? Well, let's take this guy who wrote something for The Critic, but Sean Egan. The headline says, Martin Scorsese, rinse and repeat self-indulgence. He says this: in 1985, Martin Scorsese's career was at such a low ebb that he had to take the movie director equivalent of a menial job. Now those days of the low-budget, narrow-horizoned after hours are long forgotten. His position as one of history's all-time greats is seemingly unassailable. No studio dares utter the word no to him. The result is a debasing of his talent. New Scorsese films are routinely an hour too long. The truth, though, is that his directorial talent has never been as great as his occasional masterpieces like Goodfellas tricked us into believing it was. So this guy goes in hard. And he goes almost movie by movie, just kind of breaking down everything he thinks is wrong with the movies. And like, listen, Scorsese's a Hall of Famer, but it's not, he's made stinkers. Everybody has.
And when you have such volume, there's going to be stuff that lands and stuff that fails. I mean, look at Taika recently. Everyone was like, oh, Taika can't miss. And they list off all the movies and TV shows. And then Thor, Love and Thunder, only myself and like 3 other people really, really enjoyed it. And everyone else is like, forget you, jabronis.
Well, seriously, the reaction to Thor, Love and Thunder gives me hope, because it says that maybe what Scorsese sees, maybe what I saw in Thor, Love and Thunder, which is, hey, listen, Thor, Love and Thunder was made for 12-year-olds, in my opinion. And maybe Taika is just a big 12-year-old. I don't know Taika Waititi.
Cody might be a big 12-year-old.
He clearly digs that stuff. But I'm going to say something else. I'm not a huge fan of the Deadpool movies either. And the reason is because I feel like it's just a big joke.
It's sophomoric.
Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of that. I like the comic book movies that have a heavier theme, that go deeper into our humanity. But then this guy, it's like, here's the problem with critique, is it's all wrapped up in this atmosphere we've made. This guy goes through this entire article just bashing Scorsese, every movie he's ever done. Then he gets to the crux. Like, here's the funny thing about our society now, Cody, in our headline society. The headlines say something, and if you don't read the whole article, you may never get to the motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Here, in the next to last paragraph, we get to this guy's motivation of his Scorsese bashing. Scorsese recently slammed the Marvel Cinematic Universe, asserting that its component films are sensationalist and empty. In fact, thoughtfulness and rationalism suffuse every single one of them. In Captain America: Civil War, the vigilante nature of superheroes and costume crime fighters is subject to profound questioning. Such solipsism demonstrates that this former paragon of New Hollywood has somewhere along the line become old school, or perhaps that should be establishment with a capital E. How else to describe somebody whose overlong latter-day efforts prove that he's reached that status of untouchable putincy that so many successful artists attain? It is obtained, of course, always to their and our disadvantage. So his whole motivation is released here in these last couple paragraphs. He didn't like Scorsese's bashing of superhero movies. That was his motivation for it. And I'm like, well, this isn't really it either, bro. Because Scorsese's clearly a talented guy.
And part of the issue is like with Scorsese and this guy is the broad brushstrokes that they paint it with, that you see, or that they only see a snippet of something and then presume everything's like this.
Right.
And it's not an all or nothing most of the time. And I honestly wasn't shocked when Scorsese came out and said that he doesn't watch those movies, yada, yada.
Yeah, of course not, right?
If I was to stereotype him, I would not presume that he would be into comic books.
Mm-hmm.
B, he makes films. He's constantly working. How would he have time to watch 40 Marvel movies? It would be too much.
Scorsese's not watching the Infinity Saga.
He's not. He's not watching the director's cut of Lord of the Rings 1, 2, and 3.
I think we should strap Scorsese down and force him to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, like all 4.5 hours in one sitting, and just record his thoughts. That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
It would. I kind of want it to look like a Clockwork Orange, where the eyes are being pried open.
Bird Box with the dude keeping the old lady's eyes open. Look at it. Look at it, Scorsese. Look at all the dark colors. So this prompted Guillermo del Toro, another accomplished director, come out to Scorsese's defense. He said, I very, very seldom post anything contradictory here. See, he's not contrary like you, Cody.
Contrarian Cody.
But, and he's talking about this article by Sean Egan, the amount of misconceptions, sloppy inaccuracies, and hostile adjectives not backed by an actual rationale is offensive, cruel, and ill-intentioned. This article baited them traffic, but at what cost? To be clear, if God offered to shorten my life to lengthen Scorsese's, I'd take the deal. This man understands cinema, defends cinema, embodies cinema. He's always fought for the art of it and against the industry of it. He's never been tamed and has a firm place in history. Now, again, like if Guillermo del Toro was sitting right here, it's like, but you understand you're doing the same thing as Sean Egan is doing in his article, because this art that you're resting on is just as thin and flimsy as his argument. Like so we can't criticize Scorsese because you're going to defend him with this art, which, coincidentally and to your advantage, you get to define.
Yeah. And I, again, am going to go back to like physical art. They romanticize the idea of the struggling, hungry artist. Mm-hmm. And that's what it sounds like with Del Toro and Scorsese, even though they are both financially well off and have made huge movies with huge budgets. And they're basically comparing superhero movies to Thomas Kincaid mass-produced artwork that your grandma has hanging up in her living room.
Yeah.
And again, it is artwork still, though. Just because they don't like your Jackson Pollock drips doesn't mean that it doesn't count, or their opinion doesn't count for art. No. You guys have two different modes of art, and that's okay. Different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, Hayao Miyazaki, and I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Sorry if he mispronounced.
Earlier this year, he also went full in on criticizing some of the Hollywood films that he, quote unquote, hates most. Over the years, his political stance about America's involvement in global conflicts, as well as the country's contribution towards the globalization of American culture, has been pretty much the same. He's, quote, anti-jeans, anti-bourbon, anti-burgers, anti-fried chicken, anti-cola, anti-American coffee, anti-New York, anti-West Coast.
I'm okay being anti the last two.
He says this, okay? This is his criticism of what I would assume are movies like superhero movies. Quote, Americans shoot things and they blow up and the like, so as you'd expect, they make movies like that. If someone is the enemy, it's okay to kill endless numbers of them. Lord of the Rings is like that. If it's the enemy, which is interesting because that's, I mean, although Hollywood remade them.
British.
It's British, but okay. If it's the enemy, there's killing without separation between civilians and soldiers that falls within collateral damage. He compares the visual politics of large-scale Hollywood productions, such as The Lord of the Rings, to America's international policies. Fair?
So this critique goes with some people's critique of Top Gun 2, that it was just an American government propaganda film, producing propaganda for war and globalization of big gun, big ammo, those sorts of things. I think that within American cinema, you're going to see reflections of society and reflections of our government at times, but I'm not going to do, again, broad brushstrokes and say, it's like this everywhere all the time. I can point to any Sylvester Stallone movie, or most any, and be like, yeah, there's a lot of explosions, or there's a lot of hitting and violence that I'd come to expect if he's in the movie. But I don't expect that with most Anne Hathaway movies.
Right.
So,
except that one time when she was Catwoman.
Yeah.
Poorly, I might add.
It's not across the board. It might be in some films. It might be in some franchises, but it's not across the board everywhere. It is, but you make art. If you want to be successful and you want to get paid, you make art that people will consume. And so you have to reflect something that can connect them to your piece of art.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to wrap this up, and I want to wrap up this idea of what I'm getting at with critique of pop culture. And I'm going to go to an article here that's going to seem unrelated at first. Are you aware of the Billy Eichner movie that just opened up called Bros?
Yes.
Okay. So Bros is a movie made by Billy Eichner, and it's the first gay rom-com. That's what they're saying it is.
Yeah. Universal
released it. First major studio film to feature a main cast of actors in the LGBT community. While it got good reviews, it's a barrier breaking. They're saying it's a barrier breaking movie. And I'm not a member of that community, so I can't really speak to that. I'll let them speak for that and say, if you say so, then yeah, it's a barrier breaking movie. It's got good reviews, good Rotten Tomato scores. Critics liked it, but it bombed. It made $4.8 million, and Billy Eichner was disappointed, as well as naturally as he would be. When you pour your heart and passion into your art and it isn't received well, that's disappointing. So I understand that. But he said this. He said, "This is just the world we live in, unfortunately. Even with glowing reviews, great Rotten Tomato scores, an A cinema score, etc., straight people, especially in certain parts of the country, just didn't show up for Bros. And that's disappointing, but it is what it is." So, and then he added, "Everyone who isn't a homophobic weirdo should go see Bros tonight." Now, hold the phone, bro. If I may say, bro. Your movie is Bros. Like, come on. Now, this is what you don't get to do. And this is the problem with critique in general, right? Is we can criticize up to a certain point. But if we're critical of something, or if we say something just doesn't interest us, then there's something wrong with us.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's not subjective anymore. It's objective according to some person. And that's not fair either. Because, like, look, I'm glad you got to make your movie, man. But just because I'm not interested in seeing it doesn't make me a bad person.
No, and
like, look, I know I'm a pastor, and I know that conjures certain thoughts for some people, Christians. But believe that we're followers of Jesus Christ, and we believe in that everyone's invited. Saddle up, partner. You're in because God loves you, and you're made in the image of God. Come on, come with it. We are all inclusive.
I mean, for me, this movie probably would fall in the category of most Oscar movies that it's not targeting a mass audience.
Right.
That the movies that win Oscars, great Rotten Tomato reviews, great reviews from critics, but they're indie films. They're artsy films. They're intelligent films. And so even though something might be a tremendous masterpiece, I personally love the movie Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but most Jim Carrey fans haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And
wasn't what they wanted from Jim.
It wasn't.
And that doesn't make them bad people or bad fans of Jim Carrey.
No. And this particular movie, Judd Apatow helped get it off the ground. He's one of the producers. And Judd had a list of celebrities he encouraged Billy to reach out to be in the movie. Billy said, I don't want to go with straight actors playing gay men. I want representation. And he chose that. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that is also going to hinder the amount of people that go and show up for it. Because if Chris Evans is in that movie, you're going to get certain eyes to view it.
Yeah.
You're going to get more eyes.
Right.
Where if you say, hey, I like you, Chris, but you're not going to be in this movie because I want representation, you're going to have to face the consequences of not having a big name. Yeah. Billy Eichner.
We're back to supply and demand again.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're mad that most people don't want this. And here's the thing with this movie. While there are many people in this country that champion the LGBT cause, they're not so much interested in your stories. And you don't get to label them bad for that. It just is. It is what is.
I mean, if the movie came on TV and there really wasn't anything else on, I'd probably sit down and watch it.
Yeah, well, hey, nothing against Billy Eichner. He's a funny dude. His run on Parks and Rec was awesome.
His run on Parks and Rec. I love Billy on the Street. That show makes me laugh. But
he's a funny guy.
But again, it's not like... I'm not a huge rom-com fan. Yeah, right. So you lose me.
I'm not even a fan of a hetero rom-com, which is what I would be classified as.
Yeah, you lose me partially because of the genre, just like Scorsese isn't watching superhero movies. Most of the time, I'm not going to go out of my way to watch a rom-com unless my wife's like, I really want to go see this. And then that is my sacrifice.
So you're hitting what I'm trying to get at here. Is Scorsese wrong for bashing comic book movies, critiquing them? Is the other guy wrong for critiquing Scorsese? Is Billy Eichner wrong for critiquing people who just didn't go see his movie, who spoke through their inaction? They're offering critique by saying, I'm not really interested in seeing your movie. I don't think they're wrong, but we come to this place of like, what does critique mean? Mm-hmm. It just is. It just is what it is. People like what they like.
So I would go, Alan, if a superhero movie was out right now, he could probably chalk it up to, well, there wasn't enough screens for my movie to be shown in, but there isn't a superhero movie out right now. So honestly, I don't know what's out.
Yeah.
That would be taking up screens. And if there's not enough buzz, because I only heard about it like a couple weeks before it was released. There's not enough buzz. If it's not being played in Midwestern theaters, you're not going to expect a lot of money to be poured in from Midwestern audiences because they didn't have access.
Well, exactly. Like the chances of our movie theater getting that film, zero.
Yeah.
0%. And fine, that can lead you to thoughts about Kansas. You can, because we live in this extreme society, so you can have thoughts about that. That's fine. But know that most of the people here are inclusive and kind. Mm-hmm. Most of the people here in Kansas, listen, Ted Lasso's not wrong. Ted Lasso is innately Kansan. That's how a lot of Kansans are. At the end of the day, what does critique mean, if anything, and probably nothing? Listen, one of my best movie experiences of all time in the theater was going to the Dollar Theater, the discount movies that had been out for a while, on a lark, seeing Basketball with my friends. You remember the movie Basketball?
I've tried to block it out.
It's so dumb, but we weren't expecting anything from it. We knew it was probably going to be a dumb movie, and we went in, we spent our $1, and we laughed. And I remember it just because I experienced it with my friends. And so often that's what our love of pop culture comes down to, was our experience with it. And that doesn't mean it has to be a work of art.
Yeah, I would say that a big portion for a lot of people is connectivity, especially with others. And that, yeah, your work of art brought the people together, but the overall experience that you have no control over. Like when The Dark Knight came out, I went to the midnight premiere with one of my best friends, and a bunch of other people that I knew showed up there. And literally when the Joker does his magic trick, and everyone was like, oh my. And like Christopher Nolan had a little piece of that reaction, but that was on everyone around me actually reacting out loud. So critiques, again, I think that there is some vitality to having critiques. It just might not be what they intended it for.
Yeah. I think your best bet when it comes to critics of pop culture in general is find the critics that you usually agree with, people who are like-minded. And that will generally that's when critique becomes useful, I think. But all in all, it does come down to experience, because one of my favorite movies of all time is Goonies, which as I've gotten older, I have watched with more of a critical eye and said, look, this movie doesn't really hold up. But it's not about the art of the movie Goonies. It's about how it made me feel, how it still makes me feel, how it makes me remember how I felt when I watched it when I was younger. And that's what it will always be about for me. And so at the end of the day, man, love the pop culture you love. Be a part of the fandom that you get to be a part of. And if someone criticizes it, don't do what this Sean Egan guy did and rip him. Like, listen, Martin Scorsese, it doesn't bother me that he doesn't like comic book movies. It's fine. He's allowed to not like the stuff you like. It's okay. We seem to have forgotten that somewhere along the line.
Yeah,
like Billy Eichner kind of proved.
I keep coming on the show even though you did not like Thor: Love and Thunder.
What about you guys? What do you think of critique of pop culture? Has our conversation sparked any thoughts in you? Go ahead and let us know on our social media page where we post this episode. Let us know in the comments what you think, what questions we've raised out of you that you'd like us to answer. Any feedback you have whatsoever, let us know. Thank you so much for listening. Cody, it's a pleasure as always.
Yes.
Hey, next week we're going to do a poll. We're going to do a Be Kind Rewind next week, and we're going to let you guys decide what movie we're reviewing. We're rewinding to. So it's up to you guys. We're just going to give it to you. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much. Make sure and subscribe and review and rate the pod. And of course, share our stuff. Share us. And yeah, we love you guys. We'll see you next week.